When I was a child, I was walking along through a large crowd of people with my father. And after walking along and chatting for a while, I looked up at the man that was beside me. I was holding his hand, and I had assumed I'd been walking along beside my father. And I remember even to this day the chill of terror that went up my spine as I saw that the man that I was walking with wasn't him. That somewhere along the line I had left my father's side and absent-mindedly been walking along the side of another man. Well, I thank God that I found my father after that. But that thought has never left me. There are many in this world today who are walking along beside some religious belief, some power, some philosophy that they believe they can depend upon. But sometime in the future, when their eyes are opened, they're going to see that they have been deceived. You see, at the end of time, there'll only be two groups of people. Those who have held the hand and walked along in the faith of the true God, and those who have been deceived by the great counterfeiter. If you look with me in 2 Corinthians chapter 11, you'll see exactly what I mean. Beginning in verse 12, the Apostle Paul is talking to the church at Corinth. He says, "But what I do, that I will do, that I may cut off the occasion from them which desire occasion, that wherein they glory they may be found even as we." There were men that were entering the church claiming to be religious leaders, teachers of theology, and guides in the name of God. And Paul wanted to cut off the opportunity for these false teachers. He says in verse 13, "For such are false apostles, deceitful workers, transforming themselves into the apostles of Christ. And no marvel, for Satan himself is transformed into an angel of light." Now, the word light in the Bible means truth. Here towards the end of time, Satan will be such an angel of truth that millions and millions will be following him, thinking that he's the true God. "Therefore, it is no great thing if his ministers," friends, ministers of the gospel, ministers of truth, "also be transformed as the ministers of righteousness, whose end shall be according to their works." The frightful impact of waking up when it's too late and finding that you've been following the wrong God is going to happen to millions of people. In Revelation 16, beginning in verse 13 and verse 14, we see the impact that the movement of following Lucifer ignorantly is going to have upon our world. That's Revelation chapter 16, verse 13 and 14. "I saw 3 unclean spirits like frogs, coming out of the mouth of the dragon, out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet." 3 great powers united in this world at the end of time, all the powers of the world. And through those powers, there will be something that John saw as spirits like frogs, and it's defined in the next verse. "For they are the spirits of devils, going forth to the kings of the earth," or the rulers of the world, "and of the whole world, to gather them to the battle of the great day of God Almighty." Today we're in the midst of this very occult or spiritualistic or Luciferian explosion that's taking the entire world in its sway. And friends, the fact that it represents here the powers that will be influenced by these spirits as the religious institutions and secular institutions means it doesn't make any difference if you claim to be a Christian. Unless you're following the narrow line of truth, the God or the one who you call Christ in the near future could be Satan himself as an angel of light. And it behooves each one of us to understand this thing. Now, in the book of Revelation, we get the first views of the conflict brought out in Revelation chapter 12 in a vision by John on the island of Patmos in the Aegean Sea. John, assuming that his work for the Lord was over with, was an exile to that island during a period of persecution. While there, God came to him in a number of wonderful visions, and those visions were to guide and protect the church until the end of time and the coming of Christ. The one vision that covers really the longest period of time is in the heart of Revelation. It's Revelation 12. And in that vision, John sees an event that took place in heaven before the creation of this world. And we read, there was war in heaven. Michael, or the one who is godlike, and of course we know that Jesus is the express image of God, so it must be Christ that's being talked about here. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels and prevailed not, neither was their place found any more in heaven. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceived the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. If you look at this picture of a dragon falling from heaven, it's highly symbolic, but it represents something very significant. A dragon is made up of all the destroying elements of the most dangerous animals, with the result that the dragon is a symbol of the destroyer. The real truth of the matter is this being called Satan, the devil, was originally one of the most beautiful beings in the universe. He was created to be the covering cherub, and we can read about that in Isaiah chapter 14. It gives us an amazing description of what Satan was like, or the adversary was like, before the fall. Beginning in verse 12, we read this. How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer? The word pharos means to carry, and the word lus means light. So Lucifer was the bearer of the light, or the glory of God. O Lucifer, son of the morning, how art thou cut down to the ground, which did weaken the nations? For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will be like the Most High. I will sit also in the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the cloud. I will be like the Most High. Yet thou shalt be brought down to the sides of the pit. The description of the fall and the eventual result of Lucifer and those that follow him are given in the Word of God. And in Ezekiel, it explains even further what he looked like and the results of what will take place to those who follow him. That's in Ezekiel chapter 28. And we'll begin reading in verse 13. Thou hast been in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone was thy covering, the sardius, topaz, and diamond. And it goes on to describe some of the most beautiful jewels. Thou art the anointed cherub that covereth. That means that he hovered above the throne of God, probably spreading those glorious wings out, his body covered with the most gorgeous stones. And as the light, or the luz from the glory of God, spread up through him, and he bore that, he reflected magnificent colors in all direction, one of the most glorious scenes that the angels could have beheld. And I have set thee so, thou wast upon the holy mountain of God. Thou hast walked up and down in the midst of the stones of fire. Thou wast perfect in thy ways from the day that thou wast created, till iniquity was found in thee. By the multitudes of thy merchandise they have filled the midst of thee with violence, and thou hast sinned. Therefore I will cast thee as profane out of the mountain of God, and I will destroy thee, O covering cherub, from the midst of the stones of fire. Thine heart was lifted up because of thy beauty. Thou hast corrupted thy wisdom by reason of thy brightness. I will cast thee to the ground. I will lay thee before kings, that they may behold thee. Thou hast defiled thy sanctuaries by the multitudes of thy iniquities, by the iniquity of thy traffic. Therefore will I bring fire forth from the midst of thee. It shall devour thee, and I will bring thee to ashes upon the earth in the sight of all them that behold thee. Satan and those that follow him, even if they sincerely are deceived, friends, are going to end up burned to ashes on the surface of this earth. Look with me in the book of Malachi, in the last chapter, chapter 4. And there's a description of what will happen at the end of this world's history. For behold, the day cometh that shall burn as an oven, and all the proud, yea, and all that do wickedly shall be stubble. And the day that cometh shall burn them up, saith the Lord of hosts, that it shall leave them neither root nor branch. But unto you that fear my name shall the Son of Righteousness arise with healing in his wings. And ye shall go forth and grow up as calves in the stall, and ye shall tread down the wicked, for they shall be ashes under the soles of your feet in the day that I shall do this, saith the Lord. There is no future in following Lucifer. Today, and I say that, if I was just talking to Christians, they would say, well, of course I believe that. Why are you presenting this? Because today, Lucifer is a beloved leader among the largest group of religious believers in the world. The worship of Lucifer is witchcraft. And that's the fastest growing movement in the world today. There are many today that are holding the hands of another god who are going to wake up in terror one day. Now you remember the story of Lucifer in the Bible, how he fell from heaven. God announced that he was now the adversary. That's the word Satan. And coming into the Garden of Eden, he took the form of a serpent, or a dragon, a winged serpent. And there, through that medium, he deceived Eve into eating the fruit of the tree, bringing about the woe and misery into the world of man. But the one thing that's interesting about that is what the serpent said. It said that ye shall not surely die. The teaching of the immortality of the soul has transcended every religious institution. There is very, very few in this world today that believes that when you die, you go to sleep. But this is the number one doctrine that is being used by Satan today to deceive the world. If you would turn with me to the book of Psalms. That'll be Psalms chapter 115. We'll read about what happens to a man when he dies. Verse 17, the dead praise not the Lord, neither any that go down into silence. You remember the words of Christ when he said Lazarus was asleep? He finally said Lazarus was dead. Take the time to study out the subject of the dead in the Bible. It's the one subject that Satan does not want the Christian world to understand. And what's happening to our world today, I just want to show you a few things in the time that we have here. The first thing I want to show you is from a book written by a Protestant Christian called Unholy Spirits. In this book, he makes an amazing observation of history. He says this: occultism surfaces as a cultural phenomenon at the end of civilization. And we're experiencing the greatest occult revolution that the world has ever seen in recorded history. He said the consistent occultism of the late Roman Empire overwhelmed the rational, confident aspects of older classical civilization and weakened it sufficiently so that only the Christian had sufficient authority and self-confidence to take over and rebuild its faltering institution. Occultism came at the end of the medieval world, not during it, contrary to popular opinion. It has now come at the end of the enlightenment of humanism, at the end of civilization. The evidence that we have to share you that our world around us, and especially the United States, is saturated with the worship of Lucifer, is an indication that we have come to an end of civilization and to an end of the history of the world. I'll give you one example, and not necessarily from someone who's a Christian who's just looking at these things, trying to find little things to prove his point. But this book, called The Secret Teachings of All Ages by Manly P. Hall, one of the leading authors, writers, and historians in the area of occult theology, witchcraft, and masonry. He makes a statement that is quoted by Dave Hunt in the book, The Seduction of Christianity. And I'd like to read that to you. He says here, There is abundant evidence that in many forms of modern thought, especially the so-called prosperity psychology, willpower building, metaphysics, and systems of high-pressure salesmanship, that black magic has merely passed through a metamorphosis, and although its name may be changed, its nature remains the same. Modern thought today, modern psychology, human potential, the imagery, and all of these seminars that are going on mind sciences are a revival of theurgy, which was the art of controlling the world around you by your own imagination. It was called black magic, and it's taking the world today. These things should shock us and amaze us, and we should begin to research and study out where we're at individually in our relationship to the world to see if we're being deceived by these things. If you look at the slide, you see a picture of Lucifer. So beautiful and so loved by the angels that they actually believed that when he said that he should become a god, they believed that he should. That he should have that opportunity. And when he tried to take the throne of God by force, a third of the angels entered in with him. These beings of tremendous intelligence, with tremendous minds, were able to be deceived by him. What chance do we have if we don't draw close to God? Now, the image of the serpent was used in Eden, and we can see that it has been used in every major pagan culture throughout the world ever since. Look at this quotation from a Mason, one of the leading Masons, a man by the name of Pearson. It says that all the mysteries throughout the world were the same in substance, being derived from one source and celebrated in honor of the same deities, though acknowledged under different appellations, is further evidenced from the fact that they are traced to the plains of Shinar before the dispersion of mankind. As we go to the plains of Shinar, we find that the head god of the pantheon of Babylonian deities, the head demon, the word demon meant the spirit of the dead. It didn't mean a fallen angel in the original terminology. It meant worshiping the dead. The head demon was Enlil, the lord of demons, the serpent god that waits in the path to destroy mankind. You see, the Babylonians did not believe you have to worship a good god, but you must worship the destroyer to placate him. The entire system of Luciferian worship, the Luciferian conspiracy, originated around a fear religion, a fear of death. In the Babylonian text, the 7 planets are compared to an enormous serpent with 7 heads, 7 serpents rising out of the sea. No accident here. The serpent can only be traced back to Eden. These 7 gods were said to be the messengers of Enlil, the lord of demons, or Nergal, the king of Hades, the weapon by which the evil one brought misfortune and disaster and death upon mankind. They worshiped the devil in the form of a serpent. The Greeks pictured Hydra with 7 heads. In Chinese myths, each head of Hydra was said to rule over 7 planets. Giant 7-headed serpents are found in temples in Indochina, and the sun god Buddha is sometimes pictured with 7 heads, or seated on the 7-headed serpent. The Yazidis of Mesopotamia worship Shaitan, the devil, and claim that he had 7 forms. In India, Juggernaut is sometimes pictured as a 7-headed dragon. Krishna and other Hindu deities are all pictured seated on or canopied by 7-headed serpents. And in India, this day, Shiva is worshipped as a 7-headed serpent himself. The Romans had a building called the Septizonium, and the 7 zones. A common title for Rome was Septimonium, or the 7 mountains. The whole concept of the 7-headed dragon, the serpent that rules over everything, can be seen saturating the cultures of this world. The Maya god Ahuachapat, which is translated serpent with 7 heads, was similar to Chikmoto. The Indians of Southern California worshipped a 7-headed serpent. the Pima Indians worshipped the seven-headed serpent. You can go down to Mississippi area and find along the Mississippi River a great 300-foot serpent with the symbol of the cobra and great mounds in the ground and a convolution of 7 convolutions. It was the universal worship of the serpent all the way down through the centuries. I've been to Oslo and walked under the arch of one of those Scandinavian churches of the Vikings, and the entire arch is made up of the carvings of a writhing serpent with wings. And I've seen the Quetzalcoatl and Kukulkan of the Mexicans and the Mayans and the Peruvians. And I've been to Egypt, and there, as you go into Hatshepsut's temple tomb, you'll find 2 great serpents on either side with wings, and their bodies convolute all the way up to the inner sanctuary. And you can go to Chichen Itza today, and there you can see the temple with the serpents going all the way up to the temple up above, which represents heaven. Everywhere you go, especially Egypt, where the serpent represents the soul, and the serpent represents the deities of heaven, everything is represented by that serpent. It's the most amazing thing, that this entire world is saturated with the belief in the ancient serpent god. Lucifer, that old devil, the serpent, the dragon, knows that the best way that he can destroy mankind is over the issue of death. He lied to man in Eden that he could live forever, and now men look at death with the hope of life afterwards. Now, every one of us is going to face that grave someday. All the way through the centuries, when men lost contact with their loved ones, the wail of suffering has gone up. This is the greatest motivation in the heart of man. And then when each one of us look in the mirror and we see the wrinkles forming and we see the gray hairs forming, we know that we're dying while we're alive. Our bodies are dying. Every one of us face the grave. All the way through the centuries, then, leaders, intelligent men, researchers have tried to delve into the mysteries beyond the grave and understand something of what happens there. They've tried to make contact with spirits beyond the grave, anything to find out where they could get a hold of the power. And so when you go into ancient pagan cult worship that revolves around the sun god, it all revolves around the worship of this life-giving energy that somehow man would somehow have the ability to contact God and get this power. The picture on the screen right now is the Egyptian god of the dead, Serapis. And notice that although he's the god of the dead, and these people used to eat little white circular cakes that were dedicated to this god in the belief that somehow they could get that god's power inside of them to give them more life. Look at the top of his head. He has a hat, and on it is a little branch that's budding. So the god of the dead, the destroyer, the one who's in charge of the grave, is also worshipped in the pagan world as the life giver. The whole concept of makeup was the idea that the spirits of the dead would come back to a priest, a shaman, or a witch doctor. And the witch doctor would direct the people to paint themselves up to look like this spirit in order to pay homage to it, to gain power from it. Now this picture here, a symbol of a copy of some of the ornaments that were used in Babylon, indicates the idea that these people would make three-dimensional images of the gods of the heavens in order to placate them or gain their power in sympathetic magic for the purpose of life, for the purpose of escaping suffering and sickness. Now, if you look at this picture here, this is offering the children to the god Moloch in the land of Canaan. Here, this image the hands would be heated up red hot, and they would lay the living babies on it, and they would play loud music to hide the screams so the parents wouldn't feel as bad. But the thing was, they were hoping that the energy released at the death of this baby would release forces that would guarantee fertility and guarantee blessings from God. So this dragon god is a symbol of the devil, who in every age has been looked to as the life giver, the serpent god. In the Roman Church, they have duplicated the universal idea of receiving life through eating the wafer. That wafer is in the shape of the sun god, the symbol of the life-giving power of the serpent god. Because the Roman Church grew to such tremendous power during the Middle Ages, so much of the research had to be done in the mysteries by the secret societies. In some of the old castles, men who worshiped the ancient Kabbalic rites of the Jews worshiped them secretly for fear of persecution. And other men that delved into other areas of witchcraft and communication with the dead had to do it secretly or they would be persecuted. For at that time, the Roman Church taught that communication with the dead was her area alone. And even to this day, she believes that instantaneous contact with the dead is to be in the veil of the Roman Church. So the real history of the occult during the centuries of the Middle Ages can be found primarily and only in the secret societies. Some of these societies would kiss a symbol of a goat god or the devil and would be initiated into the belief of the immortality of the soul and contact with the dead. Terrible oaths were accepted to keep the people from revealing what they were learning in these secret societies. In Masonry, which today is one of the most prominent of these secret societies, they utilize the Bible and make it appear to the initiate that this is a Christian religion or a Jewish religion. But when one gets into it, take, for instance, the teaching that it originated in Solomon's temple. They find out very soon that what the Masons are referring to here is that this temple is the temple of soul man, or the sun god, the life giver. The worship is the same as that of ancient Babylon. On the wall, you see this five-pointed star. It's an indication from their own writings that they take their initiation before a symbol of Satan. The symbols here on these Masonic staffs show that they worship the sun, the moon, and the stars. No matter where you're initiated, whether up the right side of these stairs or the left side, whether you come from the Jews, the Arabic line of Masonry, or whether you come from the Protestant line, no matter what, you'll be initiated into the mysteries of nature. When these people in the secret societies, whether Rosicrucian, whether Masonic, whether Jewish Kabbalistic rites, when they say our Father, that God is not the true God. They're holding the hand of a false God. And their Father is not the Father in the Bible, but it is that old dragon, the serpent, and Satan. We've briefly mentioned the fall of Lucifer, his use of the lie that man will live after death to create in man a craving to understand what happens after the grave, and through that deceptive medium to set himself up as the God of this world. We saw the rise of false Christianity and her connection with the life after death. And then we watched the rise of the secret societies who continued the experimentation in the occult and witchcraft and the world of the dead. But how is it that the occult and witchcraft is so prominent in our world today? We have to go back to the middle of the 19th century. There in a small house in Hydesville, New York, the Fox sisters, which we have a picture of on the screen, heard a rapping in the wall. And then they called out the name of Mr. Splitfoot and asked him to copy the number of fingers that one of the girls raised. Quickly, 3 raps came from the wall, and communication with supposedly the dead began. Within a short time, there were over 1,200 mediums in New York. And then before the end of the year, the movement of spiritualism, or contact with the dead, took place all over the globe on every major continent. It was the moving of Lucifer towards his final deception to take the human race into deception. In this next slide, ancient wisdom revived is a term that is applied to the teaching of theosophy, a revival of the ancient occult again just after the movement of the Fox sisters began. In Vermont, a couple of men by the name of the Eddy brothers were carrying on tremendous seances where on stage they would go into a trance and demonic spirits would manifest, appearing to be people who once lived in the past. Some of the wealthiest in society came to see the Eddy brothers' performances. On this next slide is a man by the name of Alcott. He was a lawyer and very interested in proving that the phenomenon of spiritualism, or contact with the dead, was wrong. So he went to the home of the Eddy brothers, he observed the phenomenon, and then he tried to find out where the trap doors were. He crawled under the house, knocked on the walls. He discovered that there was something real happening there, and the rest of his life was dedicated to the subject of spiritualism. While he was there, he met a Russian seer or psychic by the name of Helena Blavatská. She had once been a Christian and left it and went into the worship of the occult. She studied in Egypt and in India, and now she was there helping the Eddy brothers. Together, these two went back to England, and they started what was called the Theosophy Society. In the 1870s, she believed that beings from the spirit world that she called the secret masters were giving her a body of knowledge that was to be revealed to the world. A union not only of occult history through the centuries, which would include every major religion, but a union of spiritualism now and science and philosophies to reach the great minds of the world. This accumulation of data that came from the spirit world was called Isis Unveiled, and laid a foundation for a whole new age of spiritualism, but now acceptable to the upper classes. The lady that you see on the picture now is a lady by the name of Mary Besant, who joined that organization and brought with it her interest in social reform. It was here that we see the seed of the passive social movements that have affected our world today. Everything from women's liberation to civil rights had its birth in the work that she did in India in raising up the Indian people to overthrow their British overlords who were Christians. At this same time, a continuous, slow-moving but powerful international conspiracy was developing. It had begun in the middle of the 18th century with a man by the name of Adam Weishaupt. But in the middle of the 19th century, with the grand movement of spiritualism moving into every facet of society, the man on the picture here, a man by the name of Albert Pike, one of the greatest geniuses of the occult, who spoke and wrote in 16 languages fluently, hired by the federal government of the United States after he had fought as a general in the southern states in the Civil War. He was placed over an army of Indian nations, and he rapidly learned all their languages and was well acquainted with the secrets of their religion. Binding them together is the most terrifying army the world had ever seen, creating atrocities that resulted in the European nations interfering with the U.S. government, telling them that they had to disband this Indian army. This man, who had the capacity to bind those Indian nations together, entered into the highest ranks of Masonry and formed a new society that was called the New and Reformed Palladium Rite. He became the Grand Pope of Masonry and international conspiracy. It was this man, Albert Pike, that planned the destruction of the world in 3 world wars, and his writings can be read today. The plans were simply this: to open up Israel in the First World War for migration. In the Second World War, to work out things for it to become a state. And between the Second and Third World War, this occult conspiracy to dominate the world laid this terrible plan: to build up the state of Israel financially and militarily, and to build up the Arab nations. And then when they reached an apex and balance of power, and the world was lined up on either side of the issue, to create incidents of war in that part of the world, to result in a great cataclysm. And in his own words, the purpose was to cause a great cataclysm, a great final war that would destroy both Christianity and absolute atheism. And the masses, discouraged with either one of these, would then turn to the truth, the religion of Lucifer. He made it clear to the people that Lucifer was a god that the people worship without any fear, without any superstition, that he was the brother of Jesus, he taught. But Lucifer had been lied about and maligned by Jesus, who they believed was the ruler of the dark side of the force, the evil god. And that one day in the future the Christians would be destroyed, and Luciferianism, this religion of light as they called it, would rule the whole world. This is at the apex of the entire movement of Lucifer today. The book that you see on the screen, Morals and Dogma by Pike, was written to give us an idea, or was written for Masons in each level of initiation up to the 32nd degree. Above the 32nd degree, it'll take up to 15 years, thousands of dollars, and traveling around this world to special retreats for instruction to get to the 33rd degree. Most people believe there's only 33 degrees, but now we know from study that there's degrees up to the 90th degree. Aleister Crowley was a 90th degree Mason, and he started the Rosicrucian Society in San Jose, indicating a close union. A friend of mine became a Rosicrucian, and one of the first things when he was initiated that he learned was that he would very soon be met by something called the White Brotherhood, who would teach him the mysteries, the secrets of the spirit world. Very soon he found out what it was. The Great White Brotherhood was the spirit world, and in his dreams he was taught the secrets of the occult. Supposedly Masonry claims that its purpose is to teach the consoling doctrine of the immortality of the soul. So in history, we have a number of converging movements. You have the public movement of spiritualism, the revival of witchcraft. At the same time, you have the Theosophical Society, merging it with the scientific and philosophical world. And then you have behind the scenes, underneath, a tremendous international movement to bind the whole world together under the worship of Lucifer. And I read you the prophecies that at the end of time, the spirits of devils would go forth to the kings of the world and bind them together to war against God. But remember what we had read, that Lucifer will manifest himself as the angel of light or truth. It could be your local church that's leading you down the path to hell, and you wouldn't even know it because you assume that it's truth. Anytime you run into teachings, philosophies, or theologies, or manifestations that are based upon the idea that man has an immortal soul, you're holding hands with the devil, no matter how nice and good the philosophy seems. The movement of this into scientific circles began to take place towards the end of the 19th century. The picture on the screen shows a number of people who are elite in society and scientists. These folks believed that everything that could be seen by the senses must be true. They had early on rejected the Bible as the answer to what was happening in our world. And they believed that Genesis was basically just a Hebrew myth that was devised in Babylon when they were incarcerated there. So when they would see physical manifestations caused by demons, they would believe it. And they had no other recourse but to try to explain it by the means of what the spirits were saying. The world was just set for tremendous deception, and there was very little outside of the Bible to warn people what was happening. I remember reading about one incident where a number of scientists were in the room. As they sat there quietly, a spirit manifested through the medium that was tied to the chair so she couldn't do anything that was deceptive. One of the scientists believed that it was a hoax, and he dove on the spirit to grab it and tear the clothing or the sheet off, to be soundly beaten up, beaten to a pulp, and then the spirit disappeared. We're dealing with terrifying powers when we're dealing with the occult. Do you think that man was a believer after that? Of course he was. The only ones that aren't protected from this are those who know their Bible and know that the dead know not anything and can command these demonic spirits to leave in the name of Jesus. One dear Christian woman, after her husband passed away, spent many lonely nights. One day she came to her pastor and she said, "Pastor, I can't bear it any longer. I don't know how long I'm going to last. Every evening, my husband comes through the doors in our living room and stands there and stares at me. And each evening I quote the Bible that the dead know not anything and command him to leave. And he turns around and walks away. But she said, I am so lonely. I don't know how long I can bear this. I miss my husband so badly." And the pastor and this lovely lady prayed together, bound the powers of the demons in the name of Jesus, and it never came back again. That's evidence, friends. Evidence that these spirits are not from the other world. It wasn't long ago, while I was in Berkeley doing a missionary project there, that a man came and introduced himself as a high priest in the occult. He said that he had 119 spirit guides that guided him, manifested to him, gave him powers and abilities, and he led out in a witchcraft cult or witchcraft church. I asked him if he would like for me to get rid of his demons for him. And in terror, he walked away. Friends, I don't care what these beings say. At the Word of God, they disappear. Please study the Word of God. If you look at this screen, you'll see two ladies, Leonora Piper and Eusebius Palladino. Leonora Piper was from the United States. Eusebius Palladino was from Italy. These two women were constantly surrounded by supernatural activity and became the focus of a number of scientific investigations because of just a few demons, maybe one, doing things around these women. The entire intellectual world was largely swayed by the manifestations. I don't care how intelligent a man is. One demon that is deceiving them or manifesting can deceive all of the brilliant brains in the world if they're not connected with the true God. This gentleman on the screen is named Daniel Holmes. He was called the Flying Scotsman. Daniel had so many manifestations that at one time scientists began to gather. In one episode that I read about, a group of these scientists were in his living room, several stories off the ground. The window was only open about 18 inches. And as they waited there for Daniel to come in, they were beginning to get a little irritated. When in a moment something whooshed through the window and Daniel was standing in the midst of them. The scientists demanded that he do it again. They didn't have a chance to analyze what had happened. And as they watched, before their astonished eyes, his body became stiff as a board. He levitated up into a horizontal position off the ground and whooshed out the window, hovering outside the window for a while, and in a moment whooshed back in, stood up, and began to talk. How could these men disagree with what their eyes were seeing? Before or just after the turn of the century, research libraries and research of this type began to develop. This is a picture of Harry Price in the National Laboratory of Psychical Research in London, 1927. When he started out, some people thought he was rather strange. But listen, with a collection of photographs and sounds that were gathered by this man, and prints and footprints and fingerprints and things that were gathered, the phenomenon that was observed, people began to believe it in the scientific circles. Also, I want to add here another movement of spiritualism that many of you need to know about. In the middle of the 19th century, in a whole other vein of activity, something that would be later called the Aquarian Age or New Age movement was beginning to have its seeds. In 1844, a man was born by the name of Eliphas Levi. As he grew older, he left the narrow path of Christianity and united Christianity and the occult teachings together. He wrote a gospel that sounds just like a gospel in the New Testament. It was called the Aquarian Gospel of Jesus Christ, and that's what's on the screen right now. As you read this book, it reads just like a gospel, but it goes on and it describes where Jesus went. Supposedly during those years, the Bible doesn't say much about him. From the time that he was 12 to the time that he was 30 years old, 18 years, and he describes him as going around this world to Egypt and India and Tibet and gaining these occult abilities to perform miracles. In this way, the occult was beginning to accept Jesus as a Savior to them, as a God to them. And this has been refined through the years so that many Christians don't realize that the Christ that they're serving is not the Christ that is described in the Bible. One man that did a tremendous amount for the occult, and his books were published during the 60s, is on the screen. His name was Aleister Crowley. And if you look at this picture, he's the man that's standing up. The people that are kneeling around him in this occult coven, a prestigious coven for scientists and intellectuals and artists and singers, was called the Golden Dawn in London. And if you look at the back of the man in the foreground, you'll see the symbol of the Jewish religion. Almost all of these people were Jews. And you have to realize that the Jews had their own secret teachings from Babylon that were called the Kabbalistic rites, or Kabbalism. And these teachings revolved around Chaldean astrology worship, and they made God, Jehovah, the same God as the devil by just simply turning the word around. They worshipped one God as both good and evil. A terrible system of studying the occult by the Jews. And largely, this area that was hidden deep within memorized initiation was largely behind much of the movement of the occult in this age. But eventually, Aleister Crowley was kicked out of this organization. Going to Egypt, he had a vision, and he believed it was being taught to him from the world of the dead that he was the beast of Revelation. He carried a staff with 666 on it. He sharpened his teeth, and he would bite people and suck their blood. He was a very odd character. But friends, that's the kind of character that you are aligning yourself with when you enter into the belief that beyond the grave there is life. This is a picture of Aleister Crowley as a young man. He was one of the healthiest and most powerful men in the world. He was one of the greatest mountain climbers in the world. He attracted 8 women to him that married him, and every one of them died insane. He himself died of syphilis as a raving maniac. Another area of the occult, and friends, there is no way that I would be able to really cover this subject. It took me years studying, and in just this short time we can only get a little glimpse of windows into how this thing how spirits have gone out all over the world and bound the world together. Adam Weishaupt was called the father of Jacobinism. Adam Weishaupt was a Jew and a Jesuit and a worshiper of the devil. He devised a system of taking over the world, and that system held the beliefs that communism holds today. He was responsible for the French Revolution, and that revolution has grown around the world. In the occult, the philosophy of humanism is the same as that is at the basis of communism. It means that Americans today really believe the same philosophy basically as communists do. In the Theosophy Society, there was a number of efforts to prove that if man did not have any religions telling him what to do, and he didn't have any governments giving him laws, that he would naturally return to Adamic purity because every man, they believed, was intrinsically good. That the God self, or Lucifer, that is in every man, is a good God, a God of love and a God of light. And if he was just left alone by the institutions of the world, man would gravitate towards goodness. And so they tried time and time again to establish little utopian communist societies. They were tried many times in Europe, many times in America. The woman on the screen is a theosophist by the name of Catherine Tingley. And she started one of these groups at Point Loma, California. It lasted longer than any of the other groups. But the problem was that after a while, people would get to fighting. Do you know what one of these men said as he observed this phenomenon time and time again? The problem is we just can't find the right people to prove it. What the problem was that man is not intrinsically good. It's part of the lie of the immortality of the soul and the lie of the nature of Satan. You take any combination of men without the power of God's love controlling their lives, and you put them together for 24 hours a day, even for a month, and you'll find a bunch of men who are going to try to kill each other. The nature of Satan will come out unless we have religion, unless we have governments controlling or giving us boundaries. We need that today. Annie Besant, the one that I had mentioned, that came into the Theosophy Society and was largely involved in developing the concept of civil unrest, pacifist resistance to take over governments, later took the place of the seer Madame Blavatsky in what was a portion of the society that was considered to be esoteric, or that which studies the metaphysical elements of things. Now, Annie Besant was an interesting woman. She was very, very brilliant. In a continuing interest to bind spiritualism with science, her and another man, a man by the name of C.W. Leadbeater, began to experiment with self-hypnosis, meditation, in placing themselves into the world of what's called astral travel, or having your mind or your body travel through the electrical vibrations of nature. And they claimed that they would be able to infiltrate the molecules and analyze the world of science by seeing the molecules in spirit form. And they published thousands of pages on this type of dribble. You can still see this stuff, and you can buy it today if you would go to one of these centers around the world. There's still a center in India. There's still a center in the United States. There's centers in London and other places. Now, Leadbeater continued this research, and also he trained young boys. He was a homosexual. He had been a Roman Catholic, got into spiritualism, adopted theosophy, started a Reformed Catholic church that was a spiritualistic organization. And one day, while one of the boys he was having an affair with, he claimed he noticed an aura around this boy that indicated to him that this boy was going to be the Christ. He continued to train this boy, and at one point the boy began to talk as if he was possessed by a spirit, and that spirit was Christ talking, and immediately tried to rush him to New York. The result of this boy, whose picture is on the screen, by the name of Krishnamurti, when he got to New York, the spirit left him. Why New York? The prophecies of the Bible indicate to us that the great movement of spiritualism will have its apex in its center here in the United States. And somehow the spirits guided them to bring this boy to the United States to announce that he was now the Christ. Well, he's not the Christ. Everything fell flat, and now he's one of the speakers still in the occult world that's believed to possess powers, Krishnamurti. Another man that Satan moved upon to take over the world was a man by the name of Adolf Hitler. He was a member of the Vril Society, which was a society that believed that the earth was hollow, that an advanced evolutionary race dwelt there called the Vril people and had the Vril power. And they believed that they lived in a place called Shambhala. He spent millions of dollars in the Third Reich trying to find the world of Shambhala to gain the secrets of the Vril power so that he could rule the world. Many didn't realize that. In the Thule Society of India, they used the swastika in the form of the destroyer. While when he was a child, in Bavaria, in the little school that he went to, on the altar of that Catholic church, yes, he was a Roman Catholic, was a symbol of the swastika, because the Roman Church uses all symbols of the pagan crosses today on their altars. Now Hitler, and his face is on the screen right now, was trained by a medium to be a medium for spirits in an effort of Satan to rule this world through this man. But I want to tell you something else. That Hitler was called by the Roman Church the child of the papacy. As spiritualism and Romanism worked together in the movement of the Third Reich to take over Europe and begin a confederation of German states to systematically take over the world. He was closely associated with a man by the name of Himmler, who led out in the SS, and Himmler's uncle was a Jesuit priest from the courts of Bavaria and came to lead out in the SS. That SS, or that occult society, was controlled by the Jesuit order within it. And you saw the terrible results of Lucifer's conspiracy in Europe. Friends, do you think it's going to be any different here at the end of time? Do you think that falling for the New Age movement is going to make any difference? Mussolini, the picture on the screen right now, was a Satanist, and at the same time the Roman Church brought him to power. Do you think that the movements that brought about the destruction of Italy at that time during the war are going to be any different than those that fall for these deceptions today? Absolutely not. I beg you to study your Bibles as you've never studied before. And please, friends, do not give in to the movement of spiritualism in any of its ramifications. The word spiritualism is rarely used for this movement of the belief in the state of the dead today. It comes in so many varied forms that no one can escape it except those who are bound to Jesus Christ by faith. In the book of 2 Thessalonians, we read about the last deception of the human family. It says, even him whose coming is after the working of Satan with all power and signs and lying wonders, and with all deceivable of unrighteousness in them that perish. Real miracles, real wonders. And God has used the term all power. Evidently, for a period of time, God will allow Lucifer to use all his power of deception upon the human family. In biblical eschatology, we see that take place right here at the end of time. We're about to observe these manifestations, and it's described in this way. And he exercises all the power of the first beast before him, and causes the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed, and he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men, and deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying unto them that dwell in the earth that they should make an image to the beast which had the wound by the sword and did live. In these passages, there's a union of spiritualism and Christianity in a taking over of the minds of the nations of the world at the end of time. How did the union of Christianity and spiritualism bond? Well, we know right from the beginning that spiritualists claimed to believe in Jesus, one of the spirits that lived on after death. But more recently, you may have heard of the term the New Age movement. And that's what I'd like to begin our talk with here at this time. If you look at the screen, you'll see an entire library of blue books. These books were written by one author, one of the most prolific authors in history. Her name was Alice Bailey. And in the early part of this century, her and her husband, Foster Bailey, broke from the Theosophical Society and started a new society. This society is the first one that used the term the New Age. The Baileys set up a number of research centers, and one of those was in Ojai, California. And from there, there's a press that sends these teachings out all over. Now, if you look at the picture on the screen, you'll see some of the titles of the subjects that Bailey worked on. The Destiny of Nations, the Reappearance of the Christ, the Externalization of the Hierarchy. Every one of them is prophecy concerning how the spirit world, the occult world, would rise and take over the world. The entire world would be united in one great mass initiation into a next level of evolution, as they taught, into a spirit realm, an advanced period of time. And Jesus Christ, or the Spirit of the Christ, was considered to be the one who would lead us into this movement. The picture on the screen now is the door to their chapel or worship room or meditation room in Ojai, California. And I want you to notice some things about this door. As you look at the animals that are on it, you'll notice that they're signs of the zodiac. All the signs are on that door. This has its base in astrology worship, which originated in Babylon. And then if you look above that, you'll see O's and V's. Well, what significance does that have? The occult worship the serpent. And on the back of the cobra is where the O and the V and the U and the S, sacred symbols in the occult that represent the number 6 and its power. These people are virtually worshiping the ancient system of serpent or devil worship that came from the plains of Shinar. And they don't know it. It's all dressed up in a modern garb, a scientific garb. As I walked into the chapel, I noticed in the middle of the floor, and you can see it in this picture, crystals. They believe that energy from nature will be attracted through the crystals and then congregate around the area where the crystals are, and those who come to meditate in the room, like the gentleman that's on the screen right now, will be able to unite with nature better. Now, if you look at the wall on the far side, there's a picture there. It's a picture of Jesus, as it could be seen in the picture right now. On the left side of the room was a picture of the Christ. And on the right side of the room was a picture of the Buddha. These people worship the pagan gods, and they're uniting it with Christianity. The next picture is a picture of a man by the name of Benjamin Creme. Benjamin Creme was caught up in following the flying saucer movement, which teaches precisely the same system of mental exercises and communications with the other world, in this case, the other worlds out there. When he began to study the New Age teachings, he saw it was the same system, but in this system, the ones on the other side of the grave were spiritual masters or advanced people and beings that live in the hollow earth. In fact, Mary Besant, the leader of the Theosophical Society, told her that she was directed by the spirits that lived in the kingdom of Shambhala, the same place that Hitler was trying to find, and that she was directed to go to England and begin a movement in behalf of the indigenous Indians to regain their government for themselves. It was this movement, Theosophy, that got a hold of a man by the name of Gandhi and moved him into a prominent position. Now back to this picture of Creme. Creme then joined the New Age movement. He claimed that the Christ would come and that his name is Maitreya, the Buddhist name for the coming one, the loving one that's coming. He claimed that this Maitreya would fulfill all of the prophecies of all of the religions around the world, and took $200,000 of his own money and purchased full-page advertisements in the pages of the newspapers of the world. Even now, these people still claim that this man is simply waiting, a Pakistani man in London is waiting for the time when he is to go forward and manifest the Spirit of Christ before the world and lead them into this next age. Benjamin Crane wrote this book that's on the screen, The Reappearance of the Christ and the Masters of Wisdom, the Spirit World. The picture that I'm showing you is the World University of America. It's one of hundreds, if not thousands, of institutions in America and around the world that are presenting the idea that all religions are really one religion. When one looks behind the symbolism of all these religions, they believe you find the one universal religion. And when I went to this place, I was curious to talk to the person who was in charge, and it was a fairly pleasant lady. She had a number of doctorate degrees in comparative religion and philosophy and theology, and she was a very, very capable woman. And as we began to talk, and I mentioned Jesus, she says, we teach that Jesus was an important person here. And I talked about Lucifer. Yes, she knew what Lucifer was. And I said, now, you know that Lucifer fell from heaven. And she said, he never fell from heaven. Lucifer never fell. And she completely lost her composure. She says Christianity is a bloody religion, a terrible religion, a religion of hate. And there she exposed who her real God was. They believe that Lucifer never fell and that Jesus is the evil God. And many of her students will never know that. They tell folks that this is non-sectarian, but in fact it's a tremendous movement to establish Lucifer as the God of this world. The picture on the screen now is the chapel where the people come to get their instruction and their meditation. And it has the same symbol that is found on your dollar bill that was designed by the devil-worshipping Jewish Catholic priest, doctorate of canon law, Adam Weishaupt, who established the system of the Illuminati, or Luciferian conspiracy to take over the world. It's all working together. The kings, or the spirits of demons, are going forth to the rulers of the world to gather them together today. Now, the New Age teaches that the sun passes through 12 houses in its own cycle of its own zodiac. They claim that this cycle of going through one phase or one house of the zodiac takes place every 2,000 years. The picture on the screen right now represents the last period of 2,000 years. They say that that was the period of Christianity. And the picture shows two fish swimming in the opposite direction, one upside down from the other, tied together, and they believe that it was a period of bloodshed, violence, and confusion, although they believe that the Spirit of the Christ wanted to teach love and wanted to teach the social gospel. Now they teach that the new avatar would arise and the Spirit of Christ would come into him at the beginning of the next age, or the Aquarian age, symbolized by one pouring water out, symbolizing this a period of rising above and a period of occult supremacy. The picture on the screen now is the picture of the New Age Christ. If you look at the eyes, those eyes look exactly like the eyes of Charlie Manson, one who's still serving a life sentence for the brutal murder of a number of people. And the face is radiant because it's supposed to display that the Christ possesses this man, and his effulgence goes out to the world, guiding man into this new age. It'll be Satan personating Christ in a last great effort to deceive the world. And scientists, men with intelligent minds, men who we look up to, teachers, educators that have turned aside from the Bible because of Satan's delusions and followed the teachings of evolution and atheism, even in this grand country that was established upon Christianity, are laying a foundation for deceiving the world by research into what they call psychic phenomenon. Millions of dollars are spent in this country and millions around the world to investigate the phenomenon of spiritualism today. And of course, there's no way of going into some of these areas in a short talk like this, but scientists, educators, And young people going through the educational system are being dragged into spiritualism through science today. You've heard of Crowleyan photography that's represented by this picture on the screen. It's believed in the occult that every individual has this body that lives on after death. This body is an energy field that they believe cohabits ours, and that through certain mental exercises you can control that body. Like in the picture on the screen right now. It shows a man leaving his body connected by an electronic thread that comes from the pituitary gland in the brain. They believe that through mental exercises that a person can actually leave his body, travel around in time and distance and space, and then come back to his body at will. And thousands, if not millions, of young people have been deceived by this in workshops in our state universities. You can get a 4-year degree in witchcraft today. The last time they surrounded the administration building in Berkeley, California, to do a student demonstration, it was a group of witches with robes, students in the classes there at the college holding hands, doing a witchcraft chant. That's where the world is going today. The next picture is a picture of Edgar Cayce, who made the whole concept of holistic medicine very popular by his psychic readings. He claimed, just like a Hindu guru would, that his mind made contact with a secret place in the universe called the Akasha Records, where he's supposed to have gathered all this knowledge. Because of so many of his unconscious readings became accurate, again it added fuel to the idea that the human mind can contact the world beyond and be used for humanitarian purposes today. And that's why this picture on the screen here shows a holistic health food store. Many people don't realize that much of the holistic movement is bound in witchcraft and occultism today and is an evangelical tool for the devil. People in this movement believe that they're improving their body and mind. They are. But they're improving it for the purpose of communication with the spirit world. Many of these people are actually more sincere than our Christians. When my wife was having our last child, we didn't want to have it in a hospital, so we looked for a midwife. We found a wonderful young woman. And her whole interest in life was in serving people. And as we talked with her, we knelt and we prayed with her, and she would pray to God. And when we visited her house, one day I noticed her book. There wasn't a Christian book in the house. Every book was an occult book. And later when she came back to the trailer where we were living, I said, "Are you a witch?" And she said, "Yes, I am. How did you know?" "Well, I noticed your books." "Where did you pick up your faith at?" "It was a witch on the East Coast." But I don't go in for the practice of witchcraft or the craft. I'm interested in serving humanity with natural therapies. It's a tremendous deception. She was a lovely lady. And I believe many of these people, if we can get our act together as Christians, can be won to our faith. Many of these people may be more sincere than we are. But it was a witch that delivered our child. An amazing and shocking experience. The picture on the screen right now illustrates the fact that much of the massage, much of the natural therapy comes from the philosophy of the East or from China and revolves around the teaching of the body aura and the science of Kundalini or the serpent energies in the body. They believe that there are 7 or so chakra points in the spine where the circulation of body energies flow through. These are in contact with every organ. And by touching certain locations on the body called the acupuncture or acupressure points, which are laid out in 360 points originally and 12 meridians after the astrological teachings of the heavens, that somehow they can balance out the flow of body energy and balance the yin and yang in the body. And this has become the foundation of many of modern healing techniques. People getting into the areas of these electrical or aura healings are dangerously treading on the area of witchcraft and the occult. You've heard of the pyramid power. It's the same concept of energies that can be used. The pyramid was used by the ancient priests of Egypt for initiation. They'd put a man in a coffin there. The man would lay in the coffin, and then his spirit, supposedly, through the energy forces in the pyramid, would shoot straight up into the heavens, be purified, make contact with the gods, and come to earth, and then he would be a medium between heaven and earth. These energy fields are areas where Satan can come into your mind and contact you from his world. Now, a man by the name of Bovis, a French scientist, once put his scientific equipment in the middle of a pyramid, and he found that these tremendous forces flowed through there. And since that time, pyramid power has become popular. And friends, if people that don't believe the Bible will take these interesting phenomena that they think are natural and will play around with them, with the results that they lose control over their own mind. A dear friend of mine who experimented with astral travel found one day he couldn't come back to his body in his mind. He was being thrown through outer space, through the stars in his thinking, and he was being taken to destruction, and he cried out, even in his ignorance of God, he cried out, "God, save me." And as he continued to pray that God would save him, he was systematically brought into the Christian faith and became a Seventh-day Adventist Christian. Today, many people with the wands and the water wishings and the pendulums to search for water or items don't realize that that's another medium by which satanic spirits can control our hearts and control our minds. The picture on the screen now is a woman who is ignorantly playing around with the devil doing water witching, claiming that the body is an electronic instrument and through that stick will have a sympathetic electronic attraction to the water, which has a slight magnetic charge. Friends, I studied with a man who did this professionally for a while. He came to me privately and he said, "Listen, I can't love my wife anymore and I don't know what's wrong. I don't love my children and I'm an elder in a church and yet I have no interest in Christianity." He says, "I know that something's wrong inside me. I can't even read my Bible." We got down on our knees and prayed. I found out that he had done water witching, and we bound the power of Satan. And I had him confess the sin of being in contact with the occult. 2 weeks later, his wife came to me. She says, "I don't know what you talked to my husband about, but he's not the same man. He's out there visiting people in their homes and praying with them. He studies his Bible every evening, and we have the most loving relationship today." Friends, you get involved with these spirits and you lose the joy of life that can come with a proper relationship with God. The picture on the screen now, a dragon with two little children, illustrates the kind of things that many people's minds have been grown up on. Look at this, Mickey Mouse, the Sorcerer's Apprentice. You probably thought that at least Disneyland was okay, but it's not. The next scene shows Mickey Mouse from his fingers coming electrical energy of witchcraft. Disneyland and these cartoons and television is a means by which occultism is being pumped into the minds of your children. Get the television out of your house. Destroy it if you have to. It's one of the main mediums for spiritualism today. Today, some of these great movies, like the one on the screen called Gremlins, take the images of devils and embed them into the minds of children and create whole avenues of terror that can be tapped in by demons as we enter into the time of trouble. And you're making it impossible for your children to find a Savior in this way. Demons are entertaining our children across the screen today. The game Dungeons and Dragons has become so popular in the last 2 decades, and again, it trains young people to become fascinated with and exercised in the knowledge of the occult. And the picture on the screen is one of their advanced Dungeons and Dragon players' handbooks that has incantations and tells you what powers you'll have in your particular role. The picture on the screen now is to illustrate that thousands and thousands of young people, because they don't have a good Christian family, they're raised in humanistic institutions that leave them empty, are searching for spiritual reality. And friends, they're going into the occult because Christianity is failing them. Where is the hope for the future? Look at the picture on the screen now. Doesn't that tug at your heart to see little children raised by people who have come into the occult? What hope do they have? There are probably about 4 million children today that are missing, and many of them are used as human sacrifices. And that information can be documented from many sources and television programs that have tried to warn parents of the dangers of these covens. The picture on the screen right now is a coven. This was published in National Geographic. A coven is usually a little witchcraft church group of about 13. When the picture was taken, they noticed blue electric energy across that screen around this group. And look at the children, what chance do they have? We need to be close to God and be solidly founded upon truth, and then we need to reach out to these people. Children are being trained in the arts of the occult that are thousands and thousands of years old. Many of these young people are brought into this while they're in high school. Look at the picture of this witch's face on the screen today. These people are not happy. They're searching for something. And many people go to their death dying of drugs or being destroyed by demons or something in one way or another, thinking that they'll find power and thinking that they'll find happiness in these movements. The book, the Necronomicon, and other books like it can be found on almost any bookshelf in any bookstore. These books tell young people how to make the symbols on the floor and how to call up demonic spirits to carry out their own will. And it works. How terrifying, because once you think you're using those demons, you find they've taken over your entire life. Many of these young people commit suicide, or their lives are ruined. The picture on the screen is a mass murderer. Many of the great mass murderers of the last 2 decades have been people who have been controlled by occult. The son of Sam, the man on the picture right now, claimed that Sam was the devil and that he had an insatiable desire for blood. The new movement of ERA, the effect of humanism on our educational system today, are destroying the very fabric of the family. The picture on the screen now, the NEA, the National Education Association, is enforcing the concept of humanism, which is in reality the philosophy of witchcraft. Many people don't even realize it. They have the basic philosophy of witchcraft, although they'd be horrified if they thought that that was the case. When these humanists get a hold of our children in the schools, they do everything they can to erase and destroy the family and Christian culture. Today, astrology is coming back. The picture on the screen shows a baby controlled by the planets. People believe that as they're born today, that they're under the control of the planets, just like the old occults during the ignorant periods of time in the past. Ouija boards, the picture on the screen, is outselling Monopoly today. And when people touch that little indicator that goes from letter to letter, they're actually being guided by spirits from another world. There are many books that have exposed this thing, but who's studying? Who's reading? And who's preparing for what's coming? The United States and the world will degenerate into the same world as India, like the picture on the screen. I've been to India, friends. I've seen the result of New Age thinking on the lives of those dear people. Thousands and thousands of them are on the streets today, and every evening they have to lay in the dirt on the side of the road. Millions of them live in shanty towns, and they have no hope of the future except to be reincarnated in endless cycles. It's destroyed an entire civilization, and God has allowed us to see that, to know what's happening to our world, and He's going to interrupt this thing. This movement is a conspiracy. If you look at the picture, you'll see the Aquarian Conspiracy, a book by Marilyn Ferguson that came out in the 70s that gives us or the early 80s, that gives us a picture of the fact that there's a vast coalition of occult interests around the entire world that's moving us reluctantly but forward into a whole new way of thinking, a whole new age of occult supremacy. The work of men through the dark ages of conspiracy are now blossoming in the world, and we're finding ourselves bound by Satan. In the book, A Trip into the Supernatural, Roger Morneau found out the secret of the New Age. In that book, he points out that as he came into this devil-worshipping group that worshiped fallen angels, that in the worship room they saw a painting. And he asked, who's this a painting of? The priest says this is a painting of Satan. Yes, he says, you probably wonder where the animal-like characteristics have gone. And this priest laughed. He says it's very important that Satan or these demons make it so that people do not believe that spirits really exist, so that they can control in the years ahead. He pointed out that all a person had to do to come under the control of the devils that these men worship was just not align themselves with Christianity, and they would naturally become under the control of the devil and become part of his kingdom at the end of time. They taught that thousands of years ago that their master came to this world because of a misunderstanding in heaven, that he used the inhabitants of this world for his kingdom, and that one day a confrontation will take place between him and Christ, and that Christ will be overcome, and those that follow the devil, no matter what area they come to him through in the occult, whether it be flying saucers, whether it be the movement of rock and roll, whether it be through television, whether it be through seances, no matter what, or false Christianity, no matter what avenue they come through, they will be part of Satan's kingdom. When a man enters upon the pathway of self, says Spangler, he enters in a new realm of evolution that's controlled by Lucifer. Today we're in the midst of a destruction of Christianity, and I beg you not to be a part of that movement. Grab your Bible and study and find the real Savior.